The Trump administration is saying, you don't even have the jurisdiction to see if we violated your order. And if that's allowed to stand, we're pushing on a level of authoritarianism that you have never seen in this country. And people think it's a joke. We'll laugh right now, MAGA people, until it's your neck, because it doesn't stop at immigrants and it doesn't stop at gang members. The administration is claiming that they don't even need to provide to the courts evidence for their national security determinations. They don't even need to comply with the procedural requirements of the national security statutes. And they don't even need to provide evidence to the courts that they're following their orders. If you support that, you support fascism in this country. Now you can be really cool and be like, oh, that's based. Then just be upfront of what you want. You want a king. You literally hate the Constitution. Hey folks, please like, comment, and subscribe. And make sure to check out my newsletter. Information is in the description. Okay, so a lot of updates today on some immigration matters that the Trump administration is trying to implement. And I want everyone who sees what's happening and when you hear about these issues to understand that it's existing in a context where Trump is trying to gain more and more authoritarian control and influence over citizens, over the other branches of government, over the court, and over other private institutions. He wants to become a Hungarian type situation. He wants to be a king. And everything that's done with respect to immigration should be seen as a vessel by which Trump is going to assert greater and greater levels of authoritarian power. And it's done intentionally against people who the public does not consider to be incredibly sympathetic. And that's done purposely so that you have to deal with a bunch of people in your replies if you're a content creator or just regular individuals saying, what are you doing defending these Tren de Aragua gang members? What are you doing defending Hamas supporters? Or illegal immigrants. These are people who can be painted as unsympathetic, bad individuals, bad hombres. And in so doing, it's a convenient strategy. In so targeting those individuals, Trump can try to claim some cover. Because people can say, oh, it's not me. It's those gang members. It's those illegal immigrants. It's those Hamas supporters. It's those green card holders. And that's done intentionally. They are trying to make a dividing line between members of the public and their intuitions about the relative sympathies of the parties, that is Trump and the gang members, alleged Hamas supporters. They're trying to leverage and exploit that dynamic. So know these arguments when you hear them. When you hear people in your replies or when you see them or when you're talking to someone, they say, what are you doing defending Hamas? What are you doing defending Venezuelan gangs or Central American gangs? You have to be wise to that. It's almost worth not even humoring the sympathies of individuals with respect to the gangs, because it's not about that. It's about the power and how that power has been stolen illegitimately by Trump, either because it belongs to another branch or because no one has that authority. That is, it's excluded from the domain of government control in the case of First Amendment and things like that. But it's worth addressing for a moment why we should care about the rights of people who we find distasteful. The first reason is obviously self-preservation. You guys already know this story, and it's a cliche when people talk about, for example, first they came for the trade unionists, then they came for the Jews, and they came for this, and I said nothing. That's the kind of the meme, but it's true. And you don't realize how it could affect you. And let me give you a concrete example of that. Okay? So over the weekend, there were some hints that it was going to happen on Friday, as I predicted. By the way, when I say as I predicted, I'm not claiming to be Nostradamus. It's easy to predict some of this stuff because they telegraph what they're going to do. But I emphasize that point because people in the commentary space will constantly gaslight you and tell you, oh, don't worry, the sky's not falling, this isn't going to happen. And so I emphasize that for a reason. And I especially think back to my debate with Lactoid and others when I said that they're going to violate judicial orders. That was before any of the actual violations or the flagrant violations occurred. And they're going to get more and more flagrant. So let me give you a concrete example of how this could affect citizens. So over the weekend, Trump invoked the Alien Enemies Act. He'd already kind of invoked it for purposes of claiming an invasion. Now, the Alien Enemies Act is 18th century law. One of the first, you could say, immigration laws on the books ever. It's part of John Adams' Alien and Sedition Acts. The Sedition Acts were the laws that made it kind of like illegal to talk shit about the president. Clear violation of the First Amendment, right? And people were thrown in jail because they criticized President Adams. And then the Sedition Acts, the Alien Acts were the Alien Friends Act and the Alien Enemies Act. The Alien Friends Act essentially gave the power for the president to deport anyone he wanted to. And the Alien Enemies Act made certain individuals deportable who were, and it's still in the books, members of a country for which there was a declared war, and when there was an invasion by a belligerent nation. That's the Alien Enemies Act. And what's interesting about the Alien Enemies Act, and what I say is dangerous about the Alien Enemies Act, is it doesn't matter if you're an illegal immigrant. It doesn't matter if you're a green card holder. It doesn't matter if you're here validly on a visa. And it just gives you any alien, right, as defined, alien, must comply with the president's directive to leave the country. That's the Alien Enemies Act. And we saw a way in which that framework could be abused when it came to the citizenship issue, where Trump was purporting to rescind citizenship on the basis of for people who are born here to illegal immigrants. We could see how he could argue if he declared that there was an invasion, that individuals who are here from those countries that he declares to be invading the United States are alien enemies and hostile occupation, therefore not fit to receive birthright citizenship. That was one way in which he could try to get rid of the 14th Amendment's citizenship clause as applied to certain individuals. And we noticed that that was dangerous. And we noticed that it was dangerous because it applied, like I said, to all kinds of non-citizens, including people who are here legally. And it doesn't really give much procedures of anything. It's not like you're put into formal removal procedures or anything, or that you have to be adjudicated from an Article 3 court or anything like that. You just have to leave after the president goes through the kind of the hoops that the statute provides. And so he declared early on in administration there was an invasion at the southern border, and we don't agree under the, when I say we, I mean you should not agree, under the originalist perspective of what an invasion ought to be or is, as it was understood. We're talking about an incursion by a foreign government, a foreign country, not just mere illegal immigration. We think that because we have writings from James Madison and other founding fathers who clearly delineate what an invasion is, that it has to do with hostile arms, legions coming in across the border, trying to take over territory on behalf of another country, let's say, or conducting military operations on behalf of a foreign government. And what's going on at the southern border, you know, that amounts to violations of immigration law. And at the time of passage of the Alien Enemies Act, at the time of the 14th Amendment, there was no concept of restrictive, or I don't know if there's no concept of it, but there was no statutes in place that restricted immigration. The first one was in the the mid 1870s. This was the first restrictive immigration law. So it doesn't really make sense to map on to our understanding of what invasion is the mere violation of immigration law that, of course, didn't exist in this country until midway through the 19th century. So how is this dangerous for Americans? It's dangerous for Americans for the following reason. So Trump, without any judicial determination, without any due process whatsoever, gets a couple hundred people, throws them on planes, declares unilaterally that they are foreign terrorists, that they are foreign supporters of Tren de Aragua, this gang, who he is, you know, in his sole discretion, claiming to be involved with the Venezuelan government and deports him immediately within like hours. No process, no removal proceedings, nothing like that. Now, he does so, and he begins to throw him on planes, and very quickly, a district judge orders him to stop. Orders him to stop at around 6:40 in the afternoon, and to turn back any planes that are in the air and come back to the United States. A direct order from the district court judge. Trump violates that order, and the planes land anyway and complete their summary removals. Again, no due process, no showing. We don't know who these people are. That is, the public doesn't know. And they just land. Imagine that, by the way, right? Trump says, oh yeah, these are terrorist members. Oh yeah, they're non-citizens. Oh yeah, we just took them out. Oh yeah, there's no chance for review or appeal. You just have to trust us. Unreviewable, they say. Well, the court didn't agree, and the court, like I said, issued that order. And Trump violated it. Landed those planes, and then his own administration started mocking the courts. So the president of El Salvador made some statement to the effect of, oops, too late, and Marco Rubio retweets it, mocking the court, even though they landed after the order had been given by the district judge. District judge schedules a hearing today to determine whether or not Trump violated the order, and the administration ignored his order, his command. Trump says we don't need to show up, asks the Court of Appeals to summarily cancel the hearing. A wild ask 2 hours before the hearing. A preposterous request. An outrageous demand 2 hours before the hearing. But they show up and they say, we're not going to give you any information. And the judge is like not impressed at all and says, what are you talking about? I think you violated the order, says the judge. Can you tell me whether or not this is classified information? Why you can't tell me? Can you tell me behind closed doors the basis of the removal? Why you didn't comply? The timeline? If this is, and they say no, national security. Judge says, okay, you're gonna submit written filings to me by 12 tomorrow. But the judge made it clear he thinks that the order was violated. Part of the argument from Trump in court was the following: court, so says Trump, your equitable jurisdiction. Your jurisdiction over us to issue orders ends at the territorial limits of the United States. In other words, court, you have no power to order us, the government, to do anything with respect to conduct or personnel or individuals outside of the territorial limits of the United States. This is where the concrete fear, the concrete danger to U.S. citizens are or is. If Trump is correct, which of course he's not as a matter of legal analysis, that the court's equitable jurisdiction ends at the borders of the United States, what are we talking about here, folks? As a jurisdictional matter, if Trump were able to remove Americans to outside the territorial limits of the United States, let's say, for example, El Salvador, let's say, for example, Guantanamo Bay, that the court would have no equitable jurisdiction to issue orders. So you can torture in Guantanamo Bay an American citizen, and the court lacks jurisdiction to issue an order for you to stop, to retrieve an American citizen. When you start to concentrate on the fact that this is about gang members, you've lost the plot. In accepting the argument that the court has no jurisdiction outside the territorial limits of the United States, that is a broader conclusion that is going to have serious ramifications, not just on the case before you. So that's why I stress, this is not about supporting gang members. This is not about supporting illegal immigration. But the way they're packaging it to you is done intentionally to prey upon your fears, prejudices, and angers and give away your rights. Give away your rights, right? How can I say I'm giving away your rights, or he's giving away your rights, or he's trying to make you give away your rights? How can I say that? Well, your right, as I understand it, as an American citizen, and even as a resident of this country, maybe there are smaller rights for certain kinds of residents or certain kinds of visitors, but certainly as an American citizen, extends beyond the borders of America. You're telling me American citizens don't have rights outside of the country for which a judge can issue orders? So let's say that you're outside the country and immigration is refusing to grant you as a U.S. citizen entry into the United States. You're telling me a judge can't order the government to let you as a citizen who has a right to be in this country to come in? So when you propose to support the administration in this power grab, you are literally giving away your rights. Because now your right of entry into the country is at the discretion of the president. And you can have no meaningful enforcement mechanism in the courts. Now, if you have a family member who is an ideological enemy of administration and some ICE officer, someone like Tom Homan or something, the border czar, who says, by the way, on the record, I don't care what the judge says. One of these ghouls. They're scarcely human. They're pure evil incarnate. People like that who have no. You mean look at their eyes? They have no souls. When someone like that grabs your family member because he's critical of Israel or because he's critical of the administration, puts him in Gitmo, the court says we have no equitable jurisdiction to consider his detainment in Gitmo, even for U.S. citizens. That's what you do when you support Trump and his power grabs. And that's how stupid and deniable these Trump stooges, or in on it they are, that they would give away their own rights because of their prejudice and fear, because they have a collection of people, a clutch of people they call the bad guys. And anything that's negative towards them, no matter how much it risks themselves and their own rights, they're going to say, cry more liberal tears. And by the time it's applied to you or your family members, it'll be too late. That's concrete. Limiting the jurisdiction of the courts to only the territorial boundaries of the United States. Again, it's not ever been the holding of the Supreme Court. We have case law where the court is weighing matters outside of the country. There are doctrines that relate to the territoriality of the Constitution and of the court's jurisdiction, you know? When the court is determining the legality of the Muslim ban, they have jurisdiction to do so. They don't say, well, these are admission decisions, and so they're outside of your equitable jurisdiction. You can't order us to do anything. It is a remarkable argument, from remarkable here being large in scope, fascist in nature, and then the open defiance of the court and saying, you can't even know if we defied the court. Think about that. They're saying, we can't even give you the information, court, for you to determine if we violated the order. That's what they're trying to say. We have no reason, no legal basis, and you have no power to give us, the people, or to give the court the information which would, of course, let the court know whether its order was being followed or not. That is to say, the Trump administration is saying, you don't even have the jurisdiction to see if we violated your order. And if that's allowed to stand, we're pushing on a level of authoritarianism that you have never seen in this country. And people think it's a joke. Well, laugh right now, MAGA people, until it's your neck, until you realize what you've done. Because it doesn't stop at immigrants, and it doesn't stop at gang members. Let's move on, right? Let's look at the other instances of this administration's attack on American citizens' rights. So this whole thing about they're arguing and debating right now, Mahmoud Khalil. You think, oh, just First Amendment rights with respect to immigrants, right? Who cares that there's this on-point precedent that says the First Amendment applies to aliens, resident aliens? It's on point. The Supreme Court says, yes, resident aliens have First Amendment rights. Who cares about that? Say the Trump people. We have complete power to deport any green card holder. All the Secretary of State needs to determine is there a national security interest at stake? They don't even need to follow and comply with the statutory guidelines of those determinations. We don't have to send notice to Congress or anything. All the Secretary of State needs to do is to do this kind of discretion determination. Marco Rubio makes a determination. that it's not in the national security interest of the United States, and they can get rid of you. A remarkable power grab in violation of First Amendment rights. But you say, oh, well, who cares? It's just those immigrants. Not true. Not true. How can I say that? Well, number one, in terms of the private actors that are going to be incentivized, those of you who are Twitter files aficionados should understand this. Although obviously in that case, it's a complete lie and you've all been hoodwinked because you're either stupid or in on it or naive or you don't have the right information. Universities are already canceling and allowing for Trump to determine their ideologies or risk having all their funding cut and having ICE agents embedded all over the campuses. You want to talk about double standards? Not that it really matters to these ghouls, but imagine the level of hypocrisy entailed by claiming this cancel culture on campus stuff, DEI stuff. Oh my God. And then literally sending ICE agents throughout the campuses now under Trump for people who are too mean to Israel. So if you're too mean to Israel, according to this administration, now they're going to hoodwink your private university or your place of employment or your law firm to be an ideological support of the administration with the penalty of either jail or lack of funding or government suppression. That is an effective government hijacking of First Amendment rights of all kinds. But even in a more formal sense, if we allow this kind of national security rationale to predominate over basic First Amendment values, that content-based restriction is unacceptable except, meeting the highest potential scrutiny. If we allow this national security generalized, discretioned by random administration officials, if we allow that to stay by, what's next for American citizens? Are they going to condition Social Security payments on whether you agree or don't agree with the administration's policy in Israel? Are they going to condition unemployment benefits on the same? You think that they're above that in terms of their Doge, that they won't say tomorrow, yeah, we don't need to pay for pensioners who support terrorist activities. We don't need to pay out benefits to Hamas supporters. The government has no obligation to fund. You see where this gets you, right? All of a sudden, they're going to start encroaching on other kinds of benefits. And those benefits aren't just going to be applied to immigrants. They're going to apply to you. And I'm telling you this is going to happen if we don't stop it. At the same time, the administration is claiming that they don't even need to provide to the courts evidence for their national security determinations. They don't even need to comply with the procedural requirements of the national security statutes. And they don't even need to provide evidence to the courts that they're following their orders. If you support that, you support fascism in this country. Now, you can be really cool and be like, oh, that's based. But then just be upfront of what you want. You want a king. You want a king to solve all your problems because you're filled with hatred and fear. You literally hate the Constitution because only someone who hates the Constitution could support a status quo like that. Only someone with no regard for their own rights, right? These saps, these morons giving away their own rights, all to fulfill the whims and desires of Trump and the billionaire elites that support him and the literal financial interests that support him. You have this administration now, outright mixing politics in the Department of Justice in a way that would never have been acceptable to these people if Biden had done it. It's an outright assault on our republic and its guardrails. And we're sleepwalking into turning our country into Russia or China. What do you think the Chinese do with their undesirables? And how do they always phrase it, by the way? How do they phrase it? In terms of terrorist threats. Yes, they're terrorist threats. That's why we need to put them all into concentration camps. That's why we need to indoctrinate them and do these kinds of re-education. That's why we need to sterilize them. China does it. All authoritarians do it. And I don't want to live in China. If I wanted to live in China, I'd move there. And you're turning us into that. It's despicable. It's disgusting. Look in your heart and really just dwell on it a little bit. See what the arguments are. And don't come crying to me or anyone else who tried to protect you. Once you don't get what you want, once the authority of the state is being wielded against people that you care about or causes that you find important, don't come crying to us, those of us who recognize this abomination for what it is. We are staring into an abyss of our own creation as a country, and we're in a crisis. That's why what the Democrats did with the CR is so unforgivable. They're pretending as though there's a status quo here to maintain. There is no status quo here to maintain. There are no pacts between lions and men. We are in the crisis. We are staring at the lion. And the people on social media who are bought and paid for by lobbyists or by administration stooges who will give up any shred of credibility and independence for access, these disgusting losers who drop the administration's line whenever they're asked. Think about the Epstein files brought up to the White House like a bunch of pathetic little toys to wave around their binders. You think they're being honest with you? You think they're telling you the truth? You think if they really thought that Trump was doing something wrong, they'd tell you? They're deniable, they're bought and paid for, and it extends to them and these fake centrists who try to say, oh, both sides, oh, both sides. No, this is different. This is fascism. This is disgusting. And you want to close your mind off to that? You want to pretend to be smarter than everyone else around you, to be different? Be my guest. But don't say you were never warned. You're receiving the warning right now. Democrats, in the meantime, the only possible opposition to this madness, have to. It's not even, I mean, I've talked about this so many times. The most important thing that we can do in this moment is completely energize ourselves and kick out all of these geriatric losers running the party. It has to be done, and it has to be done quickly. If we can't help ourselves, we can't help the country. And that means Chuck Schumer needs to step down yesterday as leader in the Senate. And that means we need to have a completely new posture when it comes to Trump and the administration. And Fetterman's got to go. All these people, all these disgusting apologists for corruption, a level of corruption unseen in the last 80 years in this country. There is no Justice Department that's independent anymore. They're gutting the IRS so that the rich oligarchs who are in control of Trump can skirt by and infringe the tax statutes. They're letting unlawful, treacherous activity by crypto speculators go unpunished, unregulated, because they're in hock to them, because they donate to Trump. These maggots are in control of the administration and your country. That's why they're defunding CFPB, because they do some things to make sure the American people aren't scammed. Can't have that. Not in Trump's America. Not in Trump's America where everything is for sale. And he is defecating all over what our country is supposed to represent. And he's over the members of his own base, breaking every promise in terms of economic security, addressing the issues that got him a second term. And the MAGA right-wing losers, influencers, will clap it all the way. We're screwed if we don't see a big change in direction by the Democrats. And right now, the only potential saving grace that we have to rely on are 5 votes in the Supreme Court of the United States in a completely fucked up personnel situation in the Supreme Court where there were 5 votes for Trump versus the United States for that opinion. If you bet on the Supreme Court to do the right thing, to do the constitutional thing, to do the legal thing, I would call you an optimist. So yeah, pretty dour assessment, but that's what we do when we're in a constitutional crisis. I tell you the truth. If I didn't believe this, I wouldn't tell it to you. But when you have daily violations of court orders, statements that are by themselves impeachable, every day there's a new impeachable crime that Trump does. Every day. That in any normal, sane administration would see him not just impeached and removed, but on trial. That scumbag and his sycophants deserve to stay in prison for the rest of their lives for what they've done to this country. And Democrats who run in these new elections need to commit to some kind of commission of truth and justice for what has been done and the crimes that are committed every single day in the name of the United States of America by these degenerates and worms that are occupying the Oval Office. Illegally, by the way, I should say.